every time I see that picture in your background, dude, I get stoked.
Yeah, man, it calls for a TED for you.
This meeting is being live streamed. Got it. Well, welcome everybody to today's Shred Talk. ACTS, as you know, or maybe not, is a global network of action sports ministries. And our mission really is to connect leaders who are making disciples of Jesus in every action sport, in every nation around the world, on Mark's map that's behind him. Today, we are going to be talking about ministering to Gen Z. And to facilitate our conversation, I've got a couple of representatives here to help out, but we want everybody to participate in this conversation. So please, if you're watching on live, comment in with questions, encouragements, comments, whatever you got. I'll try to bring some of those statements and some of those questions online to our panel here as well. But yeah, I want to have each one of our panelists basically just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do, where you're from, and let's start it out with Mark from Ride Nature.
Sure. Johnny, thanks, man. Mark Cook, married, got 3 daughters, based out of Fort Myers, Florida. My wife and I started a ministry that called Ride Nature that I have the privilege of leading, that my wife is really more stay-at-home mom and facilitator of the household now more so, but she's still actively involved from behind the scenes place. But yeah, we lead a ministry called Ride Nature where we do action sports mission trips and working with missionaries and leaders around the world to equip and train leaders on how to use action sports as a tool for ministry, and trying our best to lead by example by doing the same thing in our community and not just telling people what to do, but to do it also. So yeah,
that's awesome. Well, I just want to say hi to Paige and Brett Davis and Elson and Josh. Lots of people jumping in, joining us here. JP, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is JP Koch. I'm from Germany, so the pronunciation is a bit different from Mark. And I'm married. We have 2 kids, and we're based in Japan, in the beautiful island of Hokkaido. And we do like pioneer ministry, like there are no Christians around, no churches, no ministries. And we do organic church planting, discipleship, and using action sports as a tool, mainly snowboarding, surfing, a bit of skating. And we, have quite a unique setting here because the Generation Z, they are quite hungry, but it's really good question. How do we talk to them? How do we reach them? How do we train them? So I'm looking forward to be on the panel today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Jolene, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm based in North Carolina right now. I grew up in Latin America where my parents have been missionaries for 35 years. So just have always had a heart for ministry, especially to the next generation that I got from my parents. I've been involved in Christian higher education for about 20 years. And in that experience, I've just I came to recognize just the incredible differences there are between generations. And as I was seeing my students struggle with their faith, struggle to own their faith, or walking away from faith, walking away from maybe even ministry, it just led me into this journey of researching next gen trends. So I've been a researcher. I'm finishing up my 3rd book on next gen trends, how to engage the next generation in their faith and in ministry. I do a lot of training and consulting with a variety of organizations, missions agencies, churches, nonprofits, just on how to minister to and engage the next generation. I'm married and I have 2 Gen Zers in my house, so that's pretty fun.
That's awesome. I see you have a really good book back there, Reframing Organizations. That's a really good.
It is a good one.
Well, thank you guys all for joining us today. And again, if you're just jumping in and watching with us, please comment in questions as we're talking about ministering to Gen Z. So members of Gen Z are more racially and ethnically diverse than any previous generation, right? And they're probably on track to become one of the most educated generations ever. And there are people right now this year who are ages 6 to 24. And so what we're talking about today is how do we minister to Gen Z? What are going to be some of the unique challenges? And what are going to be some of the opportunities that we have? So my first question is, what are some of those unique challenges of Gen Z? And any of you guys can just jump in and start us out.
I can start. I think for me, the biggest challenge that I see for this generation is that they really live in what many have termed a post-truth world, where we don't have agreement on what is truth. And Gen Z is one of the most individualistic generations ever. And they've really been taught that you as an individual get to decide what your truth is. And with that, tolerance has emerged as the highest moral value for this generation. Tolerance being not just understanding and respecting others, but also accepting, affirming every point of view as equal and valid. So each individual is kind of sacred, and they get to determine their sacred truth, and you have to respect everyone's sacred truth and accept it and affirm it, which can create the challenge then of really having a personal sense of conviction that might potentially contradict someone else's belief system. And so I think this really has created a lot of challenges, and how do we help them decide what is truth and what they actually believe?
Good. Yeah, I would definitely say I totally agree. I'm glad, Jolene, that you're in on this conversation, because it's good to have a specialist. I feel like I was like, man, we're like the best panel right now. Me and JP are just going to agree with you probably. But I mean, we see it in practice all the time, right? Moral relativism, people of saying, oh, that's cool that you believe that. What's right is right for you, but it might not be right for me. And it's hard, I think, as Christians, because we aren't the one that converts anybody. You know, like the conversion of people as we share the gospel is not up to us, but it's up to the Lord. But you see a lot of, I feel like we do, a lot of times where you share the gospel, feel like, that's cool, you believe that, but it's just kind of, you know, there's a lack of interest almost in there, because there is no, in a society that we live in, there is no ultimate truth anymore. It has become just, yeah, truth can be whatever you want it to be. So it does make it difficult.
And it also defines the way of communication, because if you communicate in a very, very direct way, then that's offensive already. Like even how we present things, turn things bad. Like people, I won't listen because this guy's or this, like, they're too much in my face, so I back off. And that's a huge challenge. How do we communicate the gospel in a way which is like not threatening, and which helps people to just come to a point where they are willing to think about the content. And I think that's really something where we have to rethink, how do we want to live our lives that people want to know more.
Yeah, so the way we communicate what truth is all different unique challenges. Brett threw in a question here, and he said, what are some of the common threads across cultures with Gen Z, and some of the things that are different as you move around the world? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I would say.
Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
JP.
Yeah, I think like social media and just like availability through like all the online information, but also like the demand to be there all the time. Like the device is like part of the body.
I think I see a common thread in maybe even attention span, ADD, the desire to move things quickly. Like when I think social media has affected that. When you have TikTok and Instagram and any form of social media, that you can just scroll so quickly and you don't watch anything. And I just talked to someone the other day and they were like, yeah, if you make a video now and it's longer than 1 minute, it's too long. And you're like, really? And they're like, yeah, you have to make videos under 1 minute. And you're just like, dang, dude, like I'm so far behind. Like I'll still watch a long video, but yeah, so I think that the attention span is definitely a common theme that I see for sure.
And I think that's one of the things that's really unique about this generation is because, that technology is transmitting culture. So whereas in the past, we would have seen a lot more differences across cultures, Gen Z is the first generation to really, where we're seeing the emergence of a global youth culture, where 50% of parents say their kids relate to kids in other cultures better than they relate to them as adults within different cultures. So it really is a phenomenon that we've never seen before. And, depending on where, there's still nuances based on different cultural places, but there is this emergence of some of these values of secularism or moral relativism or individualism that are really being seen in different parts of the world across cultures because of that technology transmitting it. So not just behaviors like that attention span and things, but also values are being transmitted. So it's very interesting.
And maybe Jolene, you can feed on that a bit more. I just read an article from a German researcher, and he wrote about like polarization, that all the information is coming from online sources, and the sources, they are not really checked like for their validity. It's just like getting information and then not really able to digest it well, and then having like a polarization. You have like the kids moving like away, like you have a block here on the left and here on the right, and then no middle ground. And that's something he said is also like all around the world with Gen Z.
And with that social media, the algorithms are feeding us what we're already viewing. And so it's feeding into that polarization where we get in these echo chambers, and kids, because they're spending so much time on social media, they're in these echo chambers where you're right, it's just lending to this. The other thing is we're seeing is just this increase, another challenge is the increase in emotional mental health issues and just psychological safety, the need for psychological safety, which makes it difficult for this generation to engage in difficult conversations. So that comes back to the challenges with conveying faith and talking about faith. They're very uncomfortable with emotional, anything that's emotionally disrupting or uncomfortable is very difficult for them, which also lends itself to this polarization and makes it difficult if we're presenting a worldview or a belief that contradicts what they currently believe or feel. So yeah, you're right, JP. It's amazing how these little devices are changing the very way that we function and think globally.
Well, so this is an interesting question. Like what are some of the differences between, because millennials grew up with technology. What are some of the differences that you guys have experienced in how you minister to someone who's from the millennial generation versus Gen Z? Like, what are the actual differences? Because I feel like there's a lot of similarities, but I also noticed that there's differences. And so what are some of those specifically?
I feel like the later millennials, like, so I'm almost 37. I made it in there a little bit. I feel like the people who are the early millennials are starting to get to the point where they're recognizing the problems that exist and they're starting to fight against it. To where I see people that are my age, maybe it's just the season of life they're in as parents or adults, but they're like, man, social media is not good for me, or I need to withdraw from this, or I've been believing lies, or I actually do want to fact check something. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that would be an answer to your question, but just a thought that I'm starting to see more people my age that are removing themselves. Maybe even wanting to create separation between the millennial and the Gen Z. I mean, like, we don't want to be associated with this group of people and the problems that exist within that.
Another difference is millennials didn't grow up with technology from birth. And so Gen Z really has had a different experience, and it's affected them in several ways. So for one, and this is more, I would say this is more the West, we saw millennials growing up in what felt like a more stable environment. In part, it was because they were not watching the world 24/7 on a device in their pocket or under their pillow. But economically, just as far as foreign relations, things in the West, young people tended to feel the world was more stable. So millennials tended to be more idealistic as young adults and have this idea, I'm going to go, I can make a difference in the world. I want a purpose and I want to do it with other people. So they were very much more team focused and purpose focused. Whereas what we're seeing with Gen Z, as they've grown up watching everything going on in the world 24/7, they have this sense of the world is scary, it's unstable, it's unpredictable. And so they're much more cynical, they're much more skeptical, and they are, not as prone to believe or trust, and they want to do things individualistically. So they want to have a purpose for themselves, not necessarily serve a purpose with other people. Now, it might accomplish the same end, but it's very different focus. So that's one difference. Another difference I would say that's significant when it comes to ministry is millennials wanted mentors. They wanted relationships. I mean, I felt like when I was ministering to millennials, it was so easy, just pay attention to them and you had them following you. Gen Z doesn't think they need mentors. They can Google or YouTube or follow somebody on, they already have mentors on TikTok, right? So they don't have this sense of, I need people, I need information. And so it's much harder, I think, to connect with Gen Z than it was with millennials.
Yeah.
Would you say that some of what they're looking for is more of the emotional connection in relationships versus the information connection, because they lack that emotion from social media and the digital world?
Yes, I would say, and I don't know, JP and Mark who are in ministry might have more, but I would say yes, but they don't always recognize that they have the need, is what I would say. They have that need, but they don't always know they have it.
Yeah, I think they need to taste. They need tasters. Like if they taste, they have like a space where there's safety, like what Jolene said, like psychological safety, without any threat. Like they accept me. I can state what I believe without being shut down. Then first belonging, then believing, and it's a journey where you come alongside and then almost you have to earn like the right to speak into their lives. So it's, I would say I call it ministry of listening, and you have to listen to a lot of stuff without commenting, just like, okay, yeah, wow. And then accepting them, and they know that you're really on the different page, but you accept them, you value them, you give them safety. And then like from that, you can move it to like where you challenge, but very softly through like questions or stories. What we use is storytelling, like Jesus. He told tons of stories to just get like the headgears moving. And these stories, they're powerful. Like they start them off on a journey where they rethink some of their stuff. And then hopefully what we believe, the Holy Spirit as the teacher will convict them of like some stuff where they're totally wrong. And what I would say, like pressure is just like the big red light. Like when they sense any pressure, they're backing off, and that's it.
Yeah, that's so good. We're gonna have Phil Goldney is gonna join us. He's running a little bit late on his time, but that's okay. We're welcoming him in. Hey, how's it going, bud?
Yeah, good. So I came back from the UK and my computer somehow has UK time. So
That's all good.
Oh crap.
All good. Well, so knowing that Gen Z is very digitally native, grew up, since baby with technology, how have you guys successfully used the digital world and technology in your ministry to minister to Gen Z?
Great spaces to get away from devices.
How do you do that?
Man, we do action sports.
Yeah, we've done, I think we've done a little bit of both. I think we have strategized to try to use media as a tool. JP was a part of a project we did where we filmed a short documentary in Japan. And I'm not so sure it reached, Gen Z, to be honest. I think it probably reached the millennials. But I mean, the exact opposite of using media is I think we've taken kids on skate trips or camping trips, and we've made them turn their phones off or leave them at home. And dude, it's like, it's not easy, but it's good. You know, they're like, it rattles people, even adults, even millennials, you know, guys in their 30s and, you know, late 20s, early 30s. It's to turn a phone off for more than 24 hours is like, people are having anxiety attacks, you know, but yeah, I don't, to be honest, reaching the Gen Z with media, I think is something that I don't know if we have fully tapped into yet.
What would you say is the barrier to that?
Desire in some ways. Like, I mean, we have a lot of Gen Zers come and they'll be a part of an internship program here. And I can't tell you how many of them are like, dude, Ride Nature needs a TikTok. And I'm like, no chance am I even remotely coming near that, you know, like, no, like, just don't. And so it's just like, yeah, I think to be like finding someone that we trust that is a Gen Z that understands our culture that we could enable and empower and be like, hey, we're going to release you to lead a TikTok is kind of a scary, you know, commissioning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think I'm getting to the age where it's like I could almost have people. I mean, I'm old enough to have kids that are in that age demographic. So it's harder for me, I think, to really understand. But maybe finding the younger
Well,
kids.
don't dive into that yet. We're gonna get to that a little later in the
Yeah.
script here, you know.
For sure.
Yeah.
But what else? How, knowing that Gen Z is digitally native, how have you successfully used the digital world and technology in your ministry?
Can I jump in?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, let them do it. I think like one of our most successful little things in ministry has been these tours we ran, and we didn't do it. Some non-believing guy jumped on one of our tours and he videoed it, and because it was lit, you know, people wanted to do it, so we didn't do it. They filmed it themselves. They came to something we were doing and they thought, hey, I like this, and they filmed, they shared, they talked about it, and it grew what we did. But we didn't do it. I think if we'd done it, nobody would have been interested.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? We didn't control the content of the video, of the, you know, of the expression that came out on social media. We just took care of, you know, an event, a tour, you know, and looked after the atmosphere in that place. And they caught that on film and shared it, and people wanted to do more. So
I think
Yeah.
one thing that's important and one of the powerful aspects of technology is it allows us to differentiate, you know, which speaks to individualization. So I know, like, I've had students who are just terrified to speak to me as a professor face to face, don't know how to have an in-person relationship, but will pour out their soul to me via text message, you know, or via social media. And so I feel like just using also technology as a tool to connect with different young people in different ways that might be more comfortable to them, especially initially. I think we can really use that to connect. The other thing is that we sometimes have young people who don't know how to advocate for themselves or don't know how to voice opinions in person. We're losing that emotional intelligence in this generation. So making sure that we have ways where students can connect with us virtually in whatever way, like if they're reaching out to our ministry or to us in some way, that there is a format for them to connect with us virtually, because they're more likely to walk past us at a booth and text us, you know, than to actually stop and look at us and talk to us. So just making sure we have those virtual pathways for them to connect with us is important.
And that there was a survey in Japan done with like Gen Zers, and 70% would rather choose like a digital channel and avoid like physical interaction with people. And so just like to underline that we need channels for them that they know they can reach us if they want to talk, but also the other way around, if you want to check in on people, just to know where they are and how to reach them in a non-threatening way.
So I have a question, Johnny. Hopefully it's okay. I can ask.
Yeah.
Do we enable Gen Z by community? And this may be a question you're going to ask, but to continue to communicate to them in a way that they're comfortable, rather than trying to help them break out of an unhealthy form of communication.
Those are fighting words.
Yeah.
I
I
love
get
it.
that,
Yeah,
I get that question a lot. So I'll respond to it. I think
Yeah.
what we can't ask somebody to do something that they've never done, you know? So like one of the things I often say is we often are in the middle of a pond in a boat, yelling to students on the shore to get into the boat and row out to us when they've never swam, they've never been in a boat, they have no idea how to get there. And so we have to go to the shore, show them how to put their life jacket on, show them how to get in the boat, teach them how to row. So it really comes to meeting them where they're at. So to your point, I mean, we can't leave them there. And that's why I love this idea of creating spaces where there is no technology, because it forces them to learn those skills. But we have to recognize that that's going to be a journey for some of them. So making sure we're meeting them at a point where they're at. Yeah.
I think the idea,
Dylan-
right, is
Dylan commented in and he said that they create, different TikToks and Instagram videos. And he said, for us, it's a way to find common ground and start a trusted relationship that moves,
agreed.
other places.
And I think the goal, right, is that we do get everyone into the boat, like we don't leave them on the shore and say, hey, like, it's good for you to continue to communicate with people forever, and never have hard conversations face to face, but to do that through text messaging. I mean, it's just unrealistic to live your life that way, and I think what's scary is I think that in the next 20 years, we're going to start to see an incredible amount of relationship issues that will surface from the Gen Zers. Like, what they're really going to have those conversations with their spouse, and like fight through Instagram or through Facebook or, and if they've never been taught how to have confrontation face to face or to resolve, to have, resolution face to face, then we're going to see, I think, an increase in divorce rates, an increase in, a lot of other issues that, that we just have to kind of be praying for. So yeah, I think it's both. It's creating opportunities to engage them and begin building their trust, but then we have to start to say, hey, like, this is a problem that exists, that we know we can't eradicate, but we can help move you away from this. I think that's the
Well, so expound on that, because we had a gal on here who I think is in Gen Z. Correct me if I'm wrong, Paige, sorry, but she said, why is it inherently bad to communicate virtually? If you're two Gen Zers and you're married, down the line and whatever, and you talk better through text because you can think through your messages and things like that, why is that inherently a bad thing to communicate through digital technology? I mean, to us, it's weird because we're millennials and that's just not how it works for us. But to them, they're saying, why is that a bad thing?
Because research shows us that emotional connections are made when eye contact occurs at least 70% of the time in a conversation. So one of the reasons we're seeing these spikes in mental, emotional health, anxiety, all these things is because so many young people are lacking the emotional, and not just young people. I will say this is a trend across the population. And often it's grandparents and parents who are at fault because they're busy looking at their phones, not into their kids' eyes when they're talking to them. And so we're seeing an emotional neglect occurring even in households where people are together because people aren't actually actively listening. So an emotional connection happens when you're actively listening, and active listening requires that physical presence of leaning in, making eye contact, being able to sense people's body language. And so you can have a relationship without the emotional connection, but it leads to a lot of other emotional, psychological health issues that we're seeing on the rise right now.
And also the depth of relationship is way different. Like if I'm online, I'm behind a wall and I'm in a relatively safe place where I guard myself. And I think to have real, deep, honest relationships, you have to cross that boundary, which is, I guess, quite scary if you never ever experienced that. And if you don't have role models who live like a relationship where face to face, where there is safety, but also tension. And we can only go through tension if we have like the psychological safety. And I think that's something where we can come in as well. Like if we show through our lives or our families how we can live relationship face to face, where we have a safe space, where we can disagree, but then come together, forgive each other, and where it's real. It's not just like a screen. It's not a soap. It's real life. And if you never had a taste of that, I think that's where we can row to the shore and open up like our lives. And we see Jesus like the perfect role model of like sharing 3 years of his life with his disciples, and then step by step creating like a safe space where they can goof up and be stupid and then don't get it all the time, but he's still loving them. And then challenging and loving has to come together. Like we can't just challenge and we can't just love, because then nothing will happen. So we have to bring both together to have like this safe space where gradually things will move on to like, hey, you could have things differently. And then I think we need patience, because that's maybe our problem. We want stuff happen quick, and journeying with people, it's time intense and costly, and it's not about the number, but I think the fruit, that's the key, which will be lasting.
Can I just make a point about generally encouraging like the generation to do stuff offline? So I have 3 Gen Zers at home, 3
We're praying
boys.
for you.
Yeah, 18, 15, and 12 now. And as some of you know, the 2 youngest particularly love to skate. We had to quarantine in the UK recently, so they quarantined at my parents, and they had to stay in the house, and they spent an extremely long time on digital devices in front of screens. And then came out of quarantine, and I drove them to one of the best skate parks in the UK. Amazing concrete balls in Newquay. And we were there about an hour, and they said like, yeah, I think I'm done. Can we go now? And I was like, what? What? Like, we've just driven like hours, and you know, you're not going to get a chance to skate like this for a while. You know, where we are in Italy, there's no great skate parks around. And I'm like, nope, we're not going. We're going to stay a bit longer. Anyway, a little bit longer. They got into it. 5 hours later, I was like, we got to go now. And they didn't want to leave. And I've said more and more often that one of my roles in parenting is to be an inertia breaker, you know, because just this stuff is so easy. It's right there. They get up out of bed, you know, in the morning, it's like, boom, I'm on this. This is so easy. Going to a skate park now, but I like, you know, get on the bus and go down the road or whatever. You know, there's a little bit of inertia often to do stuff that's offline, that's real. However, you know, we're very aware that whatever you invest your time in, that's where your heart is. So, you know, they just needed to invest a little bit more time, and then, oh yeah, I remember my chicks are coming back. Oh yeah, I love to skate. I'd forgotten, but I love to skate. And so often I just see kids, they're just kind of stuck in that, and we can be as well, stuck in that. And it just takes that little bit of time and effort to break the inertia and whatever, get out the house, go somewhere, get off the thing, have a real conversation. And then it starts for us. Actually, that's what I really like to do. So that's one of my strategies. One of my key strategies in parenting is just break the inertia and get, you know, help them get to another place and give them opportunity. Once they're there, they often get into it and they love it.
What what would be the next step? So we talked a little bit about the importance of influencers for Gen Z, that they can go out there and just find information for themselves. But then once you use some technology, you build a relationship, how do you effectively mentor a Gen Z or kind of take them along that path further? You know, how do you effectively mentor a Gen Zer?
We have to ask Gen Zs if they had good experience with us.
I think JP said something powerful earlier, and I'm going to steal this and use this, JP, is the ministry of listening. Yeah. Literally, they are bombarded with information all the time. I mean, 24/7, right? I mean, from like they wake up with their phone right there. It's so easy for them. And they, as a result of that, they don't always have time to think deeply or process deeply or even understand. So what we're finding even in education is students need less information from teachers and mentors and parents, and they need more help with interpretation. They have tons of information, but they don't always know how to process it or interpret it. And I think that's where JP's term, you know, the ministry of listening, becomes so powerful. So I think the most powerful tool is actively listening and open-ended questions that force them to think. Because they often are not taking the time. They don't have the space, even going back to what JP was talking about psychological safety, to just have a space where they can say anything and we're not going to respond and react, and tell them they're wrong. We're literally just going to listen. And often they discover truths and insights just by talking it through, because they have so little of that in their lives today.
I was on the Acts Europe regional call this morning, and I thought I'd throw it out and ask the guys on the call. And one of the guys new to the call said authenticity. But some little advantage of, I'm with YWAM Youth of the Mission, and kind of a cool thing about Youth of the Mission is often the students will come and live alongside us for 6 months or something. And we see them, they see us first thing in the morning, when somebody's got to wash the dishes, when you had an argument with the kids, whatever. Just there's this intensity and a closeness for a sustained period of time. And you can't fake it for that long. And therefore people see, and they get to know, is that these guys got something I want? Is this faith in Jesus worth something? And so I think authenticity is a great answer. I really liked what this guy said this morning. But I think in order for people to know you're authentic, you have to live close to them. You have to be around them. And so, you can be inauthentic on a short YouTube video, or giving a sermon at the front, or even in a 1 or 2 hour youth meeting. But if you can live close enough to people that they can check out whether you live authentic lives, then I think that's pretty cool. So you get to mentor by just having that closeness.
Yeah, just jumping in on that, and I think that's what we experience as well. We often have short-termers living with us in our family, and it's tough on us because you open up your family, but it's also great to grow us, because they really ask very good questions. They're very good observers, and we have to question our identity. And I think that's the key point: identity. What is your identity based on? Is it really like the truth we have in the gospel? And if they see that or smell it or whatever, how you term it, then that's very attractive, because we know that's the power which transforms everything. And then if they see the gospel fleshed out, I think with listening combined and then having like this safe space, that will lead to a point where they get really hungry. And for us, I think it's a challenge for our generation, like when Jesus was in the desert, like he was tempted with power, with like popularity, and like the other P. And then so we have to check ourselves, are we based in our identity really with Jesus, or is it productivity, power, popularity? That's what they get everywhere. But the real deal, that's how Phil said it, like it's when we really rub shoulders.
And I think it requires a different mindset for us in ministry, because often we've measured our success based on the numbers of people we're influencing. But this type of mentoring just requires such emotional, spiritual, time investment to do life, and to sit in those spaces and listen, that I think sometimes we have to redefine kind of what even ministry success looks like, is sitting and listening to someone for an hour, not saying a word effective. It can be,
Welcome to our life in Japan.
Yeah, no, that's good. I found even in my own ministry, working with kids around here, in small groups and things like that, asking them questions and being flexible, and allowing them, creating wonder and disequilibrium between what they know and what they experience and what the Word of God says, and saying how do you bring that together, and allowing them to figure it out, and not answering all their questions for them, helps to build that relationship deeper, because then they're seeking it out. They're seeking out, trying to find that information, which they're good at doing. But that, yeah, you're just asking lots of questions versus just delivering an answer builds the relationship.
Yeah, I jumped in late, so I missed the bit with you guys probably defining Gen Z, and I'm sure it came up that they want to be the center of their education, that they're the seekers and they just don't want to be spoon-fed. And they're very good at multitasking. Just a little word of encouragement, when we're speaking to Gen Zers, it's unlikely we're ever going to get their full attention. They'll be listening to you while looking at their phone, while watching a film, or blah, 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 blah. But that doesn't mean they're not listening. I think that's something I spot. They're actually listening quite a lot. They're good at multitasking. You may be saying something and you go away thinking like, kid didn't even put down his phone in here. Yeah. And actually something you said might have been the most profound, life-changing thing he's ever going to hear. So just a word of encouragement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't expect full attention, but don't imagine that you're not being heard.
Yeah, and also like I'm spending time together. Like I did paint my house with a Gen Z, and we spent tons of time. And I just asked some questions, and I thought, man, I could have used the time better. And then their parents called me and said, "Hey, what did you do with my boy?" And then nothing. We painted my house, and I just asked some questions because I was interested in him, like showing a unique interest. And then like the open questions, like I think we can learn a lot from like coaching techniques, just like asking good questions. It's not just asking questions, but really good questions. And then, as we heard before, like he went home, did his research, thought deep, and then that changed his life. And then his parents even saw like a huge difference. And from my perspective, I was like, nah.
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but how can we really empower Gen Z to lead Gen Z in our ministries and in aspects of faith? How can we empower them to natively reach their peers?
This is one of the things I love about Gen Z is that so one of the things we're seeing with younger generations is they tend to make decisions based on their emotions, their stories, their experience, instead of facts, logic, and reason, right? But once a Gen Zer has had an experience, once their story has been impacted, once they have felt the power of what JP was just describing, someone who has engaged them, who has asked questions, who has wanted to understand them, they've gone and done the research and they have owned whatever it is that they're owning. Like this is a generation that once they grab onto a conviction, I feel like they are much more committed than older generations were. They're much more willing to pay a price and to sacrifice because often they're gonna be countercultural. And whatever they've identified as their belief or their conviction is going to make them countercultural, and they understand that. And so they readily accept that there's going to be some difficulty in pursuing this. But once they've owned it, I feel like they're more passionate advocates than even older generations would be. So I think a big piece of it is journeying with them to that point of it becoming part of their story, their experience, their understanding. And then I think a lot of it takes on its own. They just own it and they go, you know? So I think a lot of it is in the journey with them.
Yeah, what are some practical ways, you guys, that you've empowered, volunteers that are Gen Z to do ministry to other Gen Zers? How have you encouraged them to do peer-to-peer?
I think we've seen a ton of fruit from giving people within the window. So we have an internship program within Red Nature where we invite people from 18 to 24. So they would fall into that window to come and to be discipled, but to actively engage with people in the community while they're here, to put into practice the things that they're learning and they're going to go home with. I feel like we've seen a ton of fruit from those interns being the ones to initiate those conversations with kids at the skate park, to plugging in those kids into opportunities to where, to be honest, it's like even after they leave, they were the tool, that was able to connect with some of the younger kids at the park, that maybe me as a 37-year-old man, might not have had the ability to, but now those kids, the barrier had been broken, the wall had to come down. So now it's, a little easier. So that would just be one way that I feel like we have seen that work. And then I think empowering the next generation, which is a little scary because it's kind of messy, and but I feel like the more that we do that, the more that we see the Lord still at work, right? Within that messiness. And
I think,
Yeah.
I mean, that's really fulfilling the Great Commission of making disciples that make disciples,
sure.
is empowering the next generation and equipping them to do it. So like, as an example here, we have an indoor skate park, and we do skateboard lessons with little kids. And we actually had a group of guys who were, they skate and they hang out all the time and they cause trouble. And suddenly we came up with this idea of like, why don't we just hire them to do skate lessons, like give them something to do. And as soon as we did that, it changed the culture of the skate park really quickly. And even though some of them weren't believers, the believers started to challenge them and say, hey, you're teaching kids, you can't be talking like that.
Yeah.
And so they led each other, and it just changed the whole culture of the park, because they realized that they have responsibility and they were included, which is a huge thing for Gen Z, is inclusion. They were included in being a part of doing something and ministering to others, serving others, and that just pushed them into a different level, I guess, of responsibility.
And I think
Yeah.
that speaks to the power of identity and individualization too. So one of the ways that we're seeing, effective for empowering young people like to go into missions is for them to feel like individually they have something to contribute. So in your example, Johnny, like they had a responsibility, they owned it as an individual, they were important, they had a skill that could be taught. And I think one of the ways we can empower is to call out of young people the things we see in them, to say, I see this strength or this gift or this talent or this skill. How do you see God using that, or how do you think God could use that? So I think when we can capitalize kind of on that, their individual strengths, and then help them understand how their identity ties into the work of God and how God wants to use them with others, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and I think that's also a challenge. Like we have to know God's story well, and we have to know their story. So, and how do we get these two stories connected? And just like one example from a church plant, we had a guy playing the guitar during worship who wasn't a believer, and then people would like stone me for like allowing a non-believer, like, ooh, how can you? But that's exactly like he was gifted, and he was so like you could really see him bloom, like starting to lead worship without even believing or like confessing that Jesus is Lord. And then that was amazing. And then just like seeing his journey from like, nah, I'm not a believer and I hate Christians, to actually getting involved in worship. And then down the road when he got baptized, that was a journey of like 1.5 years. And I thought like, that's a bit of crazy stuff we're doing here. But in the end, it was just like what we all were talking about, like give people really the chance to connect with God's story, and with like not only God's story, but God's story fleshed out in people. Like we need community as well. And they have to see and taste the goodness of God in our lives. And so I think that's the big challenge. It's not just like, oh, Gen Z. Like we're called out like to flesh out Jesus. And then they see when it's fake. And I think that's a big challenge for us. Like, let's get rid of fake and let's get real.
That's a great segue into my next question. So how can we link up the passions that Gen Z has for like, things like racial equity, ending poverty, ending homelessness? How do we link those passions that they have with following Jesus?
Holistic gospel. Over to you guys.
Well, explain that a little bit more. What does that mean?
It's just like the good news. It's not only like a truth proposition, it's just holistic. It addresses every sphere of life, and also like systematic evil. That's part where the gospel speaks to, and also like poverty and abuse or whatever, like all the social aspects. Like it's not separated. Often people try to play, oh, that's the gospel here. It's just like proclaiming the good news. and that's social work, but it goes hand in hand. It's not either or, it's all together, like it goes hand in hand. And I think that's very powerful if we show them how Jesus addresses like every sphere of society and every aspect of life. That's where they can link in. And also we have to understand how to present the gospel. Like if I only am able to talk in like religious terms, I can't connect. But if I come from like, I'm a creation care point, I can talk about creation to like Fridays for Future kids and show them like where God is in their journey already.
I want to say that it's all over the place, and hope I can communicate it quickly and clearly in a few sentences. I think Jolene mentioned that once they already taste something, they're actually passionate to communicate that. And I think, as opposed to kind of millennials or Gen X, they're not facing this massive battle of ideologies like a battle. It's much more like a marketplace. Like I'll chuck my idea out there and somebody will chuck theirs out there. And generally, they're very tolerant and very inclusive. The one thing they're scared to talk about maybe is Christianity, because it seems so exclusive and it's just, Jesus is the one way. And I think for me, pointing to, while they're kind of debating what seemed like subjective, pragmatic truth, to first show that Jesus was as inclusive as they get, and he broke with the norm and he reached out to women, to kids, to foreigners, to the outcasts. I mean, he was just an amazing example of inclusivity, which is a good thing because he showed unconditional love for the entire planet, which is, so pointing them to that Jesus and letting them get that aspect of Jesus. Because I think as soon as they think about sharing Christianity, there's a fear that this is like this, this one thing that won't be acceptable because there's a lack of intolerance there. And of course, that doesn't bypass the fact that, Jesus has a special place and he is the way. But there's so much in Jesus' life which actually mirrors, the good that they see in that inclusivity. And I think that's very empowering for them, because I think they already, like you said, they get behind causes. They want to change the world. And I think if they come to know Jesus, they're going to want to share him too. And they're going to want to influence and be influencers for him. But I think there's this one fear that, I'm going to sound like too exclusive. But actually, there's a huge part of Jesus' character that we can begin the conversation with about is inclusivity.
And I think we have to model it, I think we have to model how those things come together, and that's what they don't always see, so just finding a way. And I think going back to the whole point about story, knowing their story, why they're passionate about it, helps us connect it to the scripture, to the story, Jesus, into his story. But I also think they need to see it in our story. They need to see it fleshed out, what it looks like for the story of Jesus to meet the story of this world in a really experiential, practical way.
Yeah, one practical way, just the other day, we were driving down the road, and on the side of the road, somebody was sitting there holding a sign, and it's this lady who, she kind of lives by my house. Her name is Jenna, and we've been trying to connect with her more and more on the corner. Well, right to her left is a sign that says UPS, $22 an hour. And all the kids in the van are like, look at this lady. Why didn't she just look to her left and she could just go and make a little bit of money? And I was like, all right, who's got $1? Like, let's pull over and like, let's help her. Her name is Jenna, and don't be making fun of her. She's my friend and we love her. And so, yeah, like you're saying, bringing them into that story and giving them practical opportunities in your ministry to serve the homeless, to help end poverty, to create that racial equity, bringing those conversations in and giving them opportunities to get engaged in those things that they are passionate about, giving them the tools, the resources to be able to go out and fulfill some of those ideas that they have in their head. Mark, it looked like you were going to say something.
No, I was just agreeing with you, man. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, we have a couple of minutes left. I want to just take a second and say what are some of the resources that have helped you with ministering to Gen Z. So everybody get on their keyboard and start typing, writing these things down if you use a pen still. you must be a boomer. So what are some of the resources that you guys have used or learned from that have helped you to minister to Gen Z or understand Gen Z better? Some books, classes, podcasts, YouTube content, TikTok. What is it called?
TikTok.
My kids, but I'm keeping them. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I just said my kids, but I'm keeping them, I'm afraid.
Ah, shucks.
One of my favorite resources, just from a point of like education and training, is Marching Off the Map by Tim Elmore. Tim Elmore has a lot of great resources on just leadership development, but Marching Off the Map just gives a lot of practical strategies for like how to actually present information in a way that younger generations can engage it. The other thing that I will just say, I think JP mentioned this, is just coaching, learning coaching skills. I think that is probably the most powerful tool, learning how to ask open-ended questions. I mean, I even practice it with my kids every day, like just practicing open-ended questions, good questions all the time, and then practicing active listening skills and just developing that as like an innate habit, I think is really important. And then utilizing them, you know, like Phil's saying, with your kids or whatever kids come into your sphere of influence. You know, I'm a soccer coach. I love just, you know, using those skills with my kids, because then we learn from them. I mean, they're the best source of information, is learning from the young people around us. And those coaching skills really help us do that.
Yeah, and I think on coaching, like Heath Webb, he is well known in the Christian
Yes.
circles, and there's good stuff out there.
There's a guy, his name is like Kerry Newhouse or something. I don't know how to like pronounce his name, but he writes a bunch of stuff about Gen Z. He's got some blogs on there. If you just type into Google, how do I minister to Gen Z? I think his blog will pop up with a whole bunch of different ideas about how the church can engage Gen Z. There's another guy that I can't remember his name, so this is completely useless.
James Emery White might be who you're thinking about. James Emery White, Meet Gen Z, really talks about how we engage young people in a post-Christian culture. So that's another good one. I'll just throw out there, I do have a podcast and a blog as well, the Leading Tomorrow podcast and my blog. So, you know, I talk about Gen Z stuff all the time.
How do we get there?
Just the Leading Tomorrow podcast, anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then my website's just leadingtomorrow.org.
Nice.
And then just like on the art of storytelling, like learning to tell truth as a story, that's another thing. Like Jesus was an excellent storyteller, and just like all we can get on storytelling and how we really engage truth in a story, which is not confrontative, but it's like inviting, like we're on the same level. I'm not your teacher, but here's a story. Let's learn together from this story. And if this story then is a Bible story, it's even better. And so like Storying the Scriptures from Christine Dillon is like a really good book on which trains you basically to tell Bible stories. And I think that's very powerful.
Jesus was a really good example of that. If you ever look through Jesus and how he teaches his disciples, at that time they were they weren't, you know, Gen Z, because that didn't happen yet, but way that teaches them with questions and with stories and examples. If you look at how he teaches them, the Bible is a really good resource. Sorry, I was kind of brown nosing, but well, that's all the time that we have for today. So I want to say thank you to everybody who is watching online, all of our panelists who joined into our conversation. I just really appreciate you guys jumping in and participating. We'll keep the conversation going online. Brett Davis is writing Talk instead of Tick. So we'll get it right one of these days. But next month we're going to be hosting a Shred Talk on fundraising. So if you come here, you'll learn how to raise money, and we may just give some money away. So share this with your ministry friends, and we'll see you guys again next month. Thank you, guys.
Jolene, thank you for all your wisdom. I'm about to dive deep into this website.